Good morning, Pura Vida. How's everybody for day 2? All right. Workshop stage. I'm Reverend Hoddle. I'm going to hang out and chatter in between things, but it's not about hearing what I'm saying. It's about hearing what our great guests have to say. And this is about setting up relays. So there's some, on the monitor, we do have the desktop. And just a heads up, we're working on a way that we can maybe share this into a network. No promises, but we're working on that. And if we can, I'll announce it and I'll let you know. So in that case, if you have a laptop or something you're working on and maybe you log on to the guest network on the phone, we hopefully, again, we're still in development, but we hopefully will be able to show you that screen on your phone or your desktop for that matter. All right. So setting up relays, and this is going to be a tech talk for y'all. Thank you. I'm just listening in my ear back to production. By the way, let's just kind of set this thing up. What is happening from the jungle of Uvita? We are sending live feeds. There are cameras, there are laptops that are showing desktops. All of these feeds are going back to broadcast operations where we've got producers that are listening. That's why I got this earpiece in and I'm listening to what they're telling us back home, because we're also presenting this live to an online audience. So I should remind you, if you are sensitive with privacy and you do not want to be in a camera shot, no problem. We're going to keep the camera focused at the stage and maybe the front couple of rows, 2 or 3 rows, you might be in a shot. So again, if privacy is a sensitive issue for you, sit behind the 3rd row. Maybe it's harder to see the display, I understand. But again, we're trying to oblige all concerns here. All right, so let's get up to Nabisimo Prime. And he's going to talk to us about relays. Welcome, our first speaker of the day.
Thanks. Morning, Pura Vida. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. All right. So today we're going to go over running your own relay. And I think one of the easiest implementations out there are many, would be Kamiri's Nostrica. And this is one of the most prevalent relays out there. And Andre Neves also made an incredibly easy to follow guide that you could set one of these up in about 5 minutes. Is anybody out there running their own relay already or running Nostrica? Cool. Like I said, there's very minimal setup on this. This is meant to run in a Ubuntu server hosted in a cloud environment. You can spin up that server in DigitalOcean, Linode, AWS, and an EC2 instance, or really anywhere that you can host an Ubuntu server in the cloud. And I guess you could also do this on a Raspberry Pi, I would assume. There might need to be some modifications made. I haven't experimented with any of like the relays run off of a Bitcoin node, but anyway, the prerequisites for this are obviously setting up an account at a cloud hosting provider or wherever you're going to set that up. I'm utilizing Linode in this case. I think it's very easy to use, very user-friendly, and you can just set up. You can get a lot of free credits as well for signing up for some of these cloud hosting providers like Linode or DigitalOcean. You usually get a couple $100 in credits if you just want to play around. For this, I'm going a little bit lower than the recommended resources. It's usually recommended using about something with 8 gigabytes of RAM. We're just doing a demo, and I'm going to take this down right after, so I'm not going to go ahead and run it with that, but I won't walk through signing up all that. Signing up with Linode and getting the server started itself, we'll just kind of start from the guide. First thing you want to do is update, and I should also mention that this guide and this set of instructions is meant and tested with Ubuntu 22.10, which is one of the, I think, the latest release at the moment. So one of the first things you'll definitely want to do is update your apt repository locally. And I've already gone through and done some of this stuff ahead of time. Part of the reason is we were waiting on, or I didn't want you guys to have to wait for DNS propagation, which sometimes can take a while, but another thing you'll have to do is purchase a domain name. As you can see, I've been playing around with a number of domains this morning, with just a random domain I had bought, and you'll need to set up some DNS records so that people can actually address your relay by the actual URL as opposed to entering an IP address or something of that sort. So I've already gone ahead and done this and checked that these records were propagating to the correct domain name. Okay, there's what I set up. There's also a few other requisite programs you'll need to install when setting this up. I've trimmed down some of the instructions on here and kind of forked this just to simplify it. I took out some of this stuff and I'm running just a local Nginx server, Docker, and the regular Docker engine and Docker Compose, as well as certbot to get the SSL certificate so that people can connect over HTTPS. Let's go ahead and move over. So I've also broken up some of these, and like I said, I kind of went through some of these ahead of time so that we're not waiting, but you would just go ahead and all these packages can be installed with the app repository. I've already gone ahead and done that on here. Once you have those set up, you'll want to clone the repo. I am just using the fork that I had made because I'm more familiar with it at this point, and I'm not sure. There's been so much change in the project. I'm not sure how well the guide that I'm going off of matches up to the existing project. I know somebody had been trying it recently, and I was helping them set up a relay, and it just didn't seem to be working, and it seems like there's been a lot, it's just evolving so rapidly, like a lot of the Nostr projects are. Once you've cloned the relay, cloned the repo, you can just go ahead and CD into that. And you have all the files you're going to need all packaged up within one directory to be able to run this relay. Again, there's some stuff here that is stuff that I've added that I've just been playing with, so you can ignore some of this. One of the other things I haven't tried, is anybody tried running this or relay over Tor yet? Successfully? No? Okay. That's something I'd like to play with a little bit, but we're going to be running on ClearNet for this purpose. And the first step, before we actually bring up any containers, is we're going to have to set up our Nginx reverse proxy and get that SSL certificate. So I was already testing, kind of scrambling to get this ready this morning. So I did set this up, so I'll just go ahead and delete the existing Nginx configuration because it's not going to know where to proxy that traffic to. And then we can open up a text editor. And we're going to add this server block here so that we can redirect incoming traffic to the host to our Docker containers where the application is actually running. Go ahead and save that. And normally there's also some other stuff. I'm running as root right now, which is inadvisable in almost all situations. But I didn't want to go through creating the user, adding that user to the Docker group, restarting to apply that change. And there's just a lot of other stuff that you would have to go through in the background that I think should be explained, or there is explanation of it in the documentation for the Nostrica repo. So we can go ahead and just make sure that that worked. Perfect. We'll want to go ahead and restart the service to apply those changes. All right. Now, the final step for configuring the reverse proxy server is getting that SSL certificate. And its certbot is incredibly easy to use. It's just one command. They already have an Nginx plugin if you're using that for your reverse proxy, but there are other tools that you could use to achieve the same results, but I love using Nginx. I think it's very easy to use. You just go ahead and plug in your domain name, which I also did up here for the server name, so that traffic destined for that is going to end up going to the port we need it to. I'll go ahead and run this. And I will caution you that you can only run this so many times or request so many certificates within a certain time period. I think it's like 5 times within a 24-hour time period. And I found that out the hard way as I was kind of troubleshooting some of the stuff, which is why you see so many subdomains in there, as I had to keep changing it up and going back and fixing that. But I'll go ahead and replace just so you guys can see the prompts that come up and what it is supposed to look like. Okay, usually you put in your email. It must have remembered mine. You can put in a fake email and just hit yes through a couple of prompts, but right now we should have a SSL certificate provision to that domain, and it adds it right to the into the appropriate directory for Nginx. So you can see that this wasn't here before. Normally you'd have to add all that manually, but that's certbot making it easier for you. Now the last thing we'll do is we're going to go ahead and bring our, there are some scripts that I actually didn't see before. These might be in the newer, nope, it is here. There are some scripts so that you can just run a single command if you don't feel like memorizing any Docker commands, Docker Compose specifically. It's pretty easy otherwise, but you could go ahead and just do something like, and this should bring up your container, but, oh, you know what? I glossed over one other thing. So this is our Docker Compose file, and this is basically us just laying out all of the specifications for our containers, and we're going to be able to bring this up in one simple command. Best practice, there are some other things you can do to encrypt secrets that you want here. I would definitely go through and change the database user, passwords. I think there's only a couple of things. It's a Postgres database user, and just customize it for your own needs. Otherwise, a lot of these containers, if you don't change all of the instances of where the old password was used, there's a health check on these containers that the rest of them aren't going to start because they're going to report an unhealthy status when it's checking for the default Nostream user and password, and you've put in your own, and you can save yourself a lot of time troubleshooting by either using a simple sed script or just going through and making sure that every occurrence of, I think it's Nostream TS relay is the default, both user, password, and database name. Changing all those, and then you should be able to bring everything up. But so when we're in the directory of the where all the Docker Compose files are, this does need to be run from that directory if you're using this specific command. I know that Kamiri had packaged some of the commands to run with npm, and presumably you might be able to run those outside of other directories, but usually when you're running Docker Compose, it needs to have the Docker Compose file that we were just looking at and any associated actually Docker files to build the images in that directory, or else you're not going to be able to, it won't be able to find it. But to bring these up, bring these containers live, it's a very simple command. We're just going to run Docker Compose up. This will be a blocking process if we run this like this. We're going to do this just to show all the logs that are populating. Normally you would just add the -D to run it in detached mode where you wouldn't have the logs and you could just go about other business and close the shell. If you close the shell when it's running without putting all the logs to standard out, you're going to kill the process, and when you go to try and post to your relay and you're wondering why it's not connecting, it's because those containers aren't running. All right, it looks like we are up and running. And we can do a test. One of the ways to, a great tool for testing if your WebSocket connection is working as a troubleshooting step is using WebSocket King. And you can go ahead and prefix your domain name with WSS //. We'll see if other people can connect. We are connected. That's good. Our proxy's working. It's able to connect to the container we want it to. Let's go ahead and all right, this is something apparently it saved. I made a user right before this, but let's go ahead and add this to our relays. All right, green, we're looking good. And it's pulling up the metadata as well. I should actually go and show you how to change that as well so that you can put your npub and make sure that people can contact you if they have anything to discuss about your relay, or if you just want credit, but you can also keep the default user, which I believe is Kamiri. I guess it's just a matter if you want to be running your relay publicly. And again, this is one of the most basic relay, I shouldn't say basic, easy to use relay implementations out there. There's more stuff that you can add here, updating the NIPs that the relay supports so that people can, I guess, make note of that and connect to it if you have some desirable NIP that other relays aren't supporting at the time. And this is evolving pretty fast. So as you can see, this is the older fork that I had done. I'd be interested to see how many more NIPs this supports after they've been working on this for a couple of months. But let's go ahead and do a test post to make sure this is working as well. And it looks like we're, no. I am not sure that this is posting to here if I'm just having trouble loading it, but normally I would expect to see some logs about incoming connections because we're not running it in detached mode right now, but as far as I can tell, this is a healthy running relay. It might just be some loading on the client side, but as you can see, it is pretty easy to set up your own relay. If you take the time to set up a Ubuntu server, you can have this running in less than 15 minutes if you cut out all the explanation. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. Oh.
All right. So for me, it's really to summarize to see if I understand correctly. So you're running in nginx on an Ubuntu server.
Correct.
You're using certbot for the SSL.
Yep.
Then you're running a Nostream Docker container that points to the same port as you put in your nginx settings, right? And you used WebSocket King, it was called, to test the connection?
Correct, yeah. And that's just to test the viability of the WebSocket connection in general. There's still a lot of things that can go wrong after that, but it's a good first troubleshooting step.
Yeah, no, it's a great tool for my toolkit now. And then you used Snort Social to put the meta info for the relay itself.
So the meta info from the relay is actually in, I always go to the wrong one. It's in here. I think that's not even the right one. I guess the meta relay, the metadata for the relay is actually in the code itself, and when it builds the container, it is, here we go. This is where you're going to find a lot of that stuff that we saw in the page we pulled up in Snort Social. It's presented differently in different relay explorers. I know in like Noster Watch, I haven't checked that in a while, but we're not on there, but we can check what they show.
So quick question in between, do we then need to overwrite those settings of the Docker container?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do we need to overwrite that default data for the Docker container? Like if you want to put your own meta info in there?
I certainly would. Otherwise, it's going to show as Kamiri's name, and you should leave the GitHub repo just so people know what software you are running, but let's see, this is my, oh wow, a lot has changed even in a week. This is another relay that I'm running, but this also comes up with a lot of the uptime availability for your own node, relay, your pub key, the software that you're running, and the NIPS, just presented in a different way. But the short answer to your question is yes, you should overwrite that. That would be in the settings, or excuse me, package.json within the actual repository, and you'll want to do that before you bring the container up. Otherwise, you'll want to rebuild the container before you're bringing it up, because it's just going to build with the defaults that were in there.
All right, thank you so much. I have a basic understanding now.
Excellent.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm running the Rust relay with Postgres, and it's a free relay running on my on-premises dedicated server. I'm running into I/O problems like I/O bottlenecks, and also I'm getting spammed like crazy. So, do you have any advice on how to maintain my database so it doesn't get overwhelmed by spam? Maybe firewall rules, and how I can relieve the I/O bottlenecks.
I am very unfamiliar with Rust, so I don't know if there's anything specific to that, but as far as mitigating spam, firewall rules could help. I noticed in some implementations we have, right now I didn't add any firewall rules to this, so I guess we could actually see what we're listening on. Another thing that I would also recommend, and I can't remember if I went through it in this branch that I'm using right now, is making a Docker network so that you're not just binding all of the containers to your localhost port and then having those globally available, like your Postgres database. Exposed that, especially if you didn't change the default username and password, people could just log in to your database. And I mean, a lot of it's public info, so it's not a bank or something, but somebody could come in and just delete your database, put malicious, I guess, entries in there, or just, it's not something you want somewhere in there. But I would strongly advise trying to make a paid relay. That's something a lot of people are experimenting with to fight spam. I only very recently realized that one of the relays I'm running is probably about 75% spam, because it is public, it's not paid. I had been monitoring everything from an infrastructure level, and everything looked normal, but I wasn't paying too much attention to the application layer until I actually decided to filter the global traffic from just my relay, and realize that, like I said, 75% of the traffic is spam. I'm paying to store all that, relay that, and it's going to affect performance negatively as well. So it's something I'm certainly looking to experiment more with. I know that Zebedee had made an incredibly easy to follow guide about converting your relay into a paid relay. And you can charge whatever you feel comfortable with, 1,000 sats or whatever, and people can post and use that relay. But that's certainly something I'm looking to experiment more with, hopefully while I'm down here. Yeah.
So, 15 minutes after I boot up my machine, I have a running relay and I put it online and make it public. Can you describe what should I expect? What kind of data is going to be populated in the database? What is the relay storing, and for how long? Like you talked about spam, and obviously it's going to hold notes, but do those notes get purged after a period of time, or?
They shouldn't. And one of the considerations you want to take is this is already done in the Docker Compose file, but by nature, a Docker container is ephemeral, so it's not meant for persistent storage. You'll want to mount a volume to your host so that you are storing that, because at some point you're going to need to restart your container, and if you just lose all your data, and it's not helpful. You want that to be there. Another cool feature that this has is this actually has a database cache. It's running a Redis cache so that those more frequently queried notes are stored in like key value pairs and can be retrieved easier by the actual relay application that you're running.
So how do you control storage capacity? Like
That's a
prevent
great
your database filling up or your key value store filling up?
That is a great question. I'm just kind of letting it ride right now. I haven't had too much time to play with optimizing the database. I think that Kamiri did a much better job designing the database on this relay than I have in another relay that I wrote. I think his queries are a lot more effective, but like I said, you do want that information to persist, so I'm not sure at this point. I know that the more people you have running or posting to your relay, using your relay, that it obviously is going to take up more space, and it comes down to how much are you willing to pay a month if you're having this in a hosted environment? Do you need to pay for other volumes to mount to it? And it can get expensive pretty fast, so it really depends on what your use case is. Are you just tinkering, or are you actually trying to run a production relay that can accommodate hundreds, thousands of users and their data? In that case, that can get expensive pretty fast in cloud fees.
I'm interested in running a relay with a European provider, and one of the things it's asking me in the agreement to host is whether or not I'm considered to be processing personal information. Is a relay considered to be processing personal information, or can I tick the box that says I do not process personal information?
That is another great question. I usually click out of boxes like that, but I guess it depends on what your definition of personal is. I could see somebody making the argument that that is personal information, but I think it comes down to really personally identifiable information. So are you storing people's real names? Are you storing email addresses? And while you're not doing that unless you've added something else on that, I don't know, is tracking that sort of stuff, I'm not sure where the liability falls in there. Like if people are just posting notes with personally identifiable information in that, and if you would be liable in that situation. I'd imagine you could be, so it might be worth trying to host it in somewhere that isn't
Asking that question?
asking that question or falling under the jurisdiction of GDPR or something? Yeah.
GDPR, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
That's just what I wanted to add. Look up GDPR because IP addresses, I think, are not considered personal information, but some people use their real name on the platform that is considered personal information, but then the GDPR also makes a reference to special personal information, which is birth dates, race, religion, everything a person can be discriminated upon. So there's like different levels. Look into it.
Hi. You mentioned that a big percentage of the content that you receive is basically spam. And I'm just curious to know, how do you know that? I mean, technically speaking, right? Does it have some monitoring capabilities, or is just because you are a developer and you can just query the database and get that information by yourself?
That was a realization I made only after filtering on Snort down to my global feed for the relay. I do monitor, I have a dashboard set up here where I'm monitoring all the infrastructure related stuff. So for instance, everything looked pretty normal on here as far as resource consumption. I wasn't seeing large spikes or any database performance issues that would otherwise cause alarm. kind of hoping this would load faster, but no, to answer your question, I wasn't going in and looking for running any like stored procedures, looking for any abnormal queries or anything of that sort. I was very surprised when I opened up the global feed and saw, you know, just all these posts in presumably Mandarin or another language. I did see some from the relay that we're looking at right now is actually in a sandbox environment that I set up for our Bitcoin meetup. And it's so people can log in and just kind of play and not worry about breaking things on their own computer or setting up a server in the cloud. But I imagine that you could set up a query or stored procedures to regularly check for that sort of thing. Again, I think the best tool to begin with would be preventing people from getting onto that by making it a paid relay. But I think that's certainly something worth exploring about cleaning up your database as well, because if you do find that stuff that's there, you're paying for it, and I think it's okay to get rid of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. I think we're probably, oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
I assume I could make this private if I wanted to?
Yeah, you could.
Make it a private relay?
You could use it privately.
Yeah.
There are a couple different ways you could do that. My kind of hacky solution to that would be, one, not posting about it places, but I guess clients would still need to query it if other people were retrieving information for you, or I guess what would the use case be?
To restrict it to a certain group of people, like, I don't know, friends, family, just a small group?
I think the paid relay model would kind of be the easiest option there, just based on some of the guides. I haven't delved too far into that. This is very much a public relay. So I'd be interested to hear what other people are doing to make their relays private outside of making it a paid relay. But unfortunately, I don't have a really good answer for that. Good.
Yeah, hi. I'm running the Nostream as well. I'm running one of the relays, and I wanted to change the domain name. Just redirect it. Is that something that's easy to do? Will that impact anybody that's on the relay?
That is a good question. I mean, people are going to, if you change the domain name, they're going to need to change that in their client. Changing a DNS record is very easy. You can also update your Nginx server to update that server block that we had made earlier to redirect to that domain name. But yes, if people were to continue using that, they would need to update that in their client. So I guess it depends how many people would be affected by that and if it's feasible to do so. But to actually change it on your end is pretty easy. You could just make a new record, new DNS record.
Right. I just didn't want to impact anybody, so maybe I'll just leave it the same. Okay. Thanks.
Cool. Good. All right. Thank you guys so much.